Wake up cities, start and take control over your future. It's been days, weeks and years, it's time to make it real. Stand up with me. We have so many goals to believe in. We'll try everything to achieve it. We have so many goals to believe in. We'll try everything to achieve it.
Welcome everybody to this international session of Family Economy Week, broadcast in Italy, Australia, Japan, Finland and Greece and Spain, with the patronage of the European Commission and under the high patronage of the European Parliament. You can find all details of the whole event on www.familyeconomyweek.eu. Finance at the service of the planet, from energy transition to sustainable investments. The energy transition process is necessary to draw a future in which climate change does not determine life choices obliged by the attempt to escape natural upheavals. Its advantages, however, are not limited to the environment, but also into economic and production fields. In saving the planet, you can create, we know, also new jobs. And what are the actions that the economy and finance can implement to make the contribution or even be a leader also in safeguarding the planet? And this will be some of the topics that we will discuss with incredible panel today. And talking about the future, remember please this date, 2099, because we will talk about it later in the event with an extraordinary and I think intense piece of music created specifically for the Family Economy Week. And now I'm really glad to welcome to the panelists of this session, and welcome to Marco Alberti, Italian ambassador in Kazakhstan and Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Welcome, Marco. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Marco. And welcome also to Silvia Dallai, Partner Sustainability Department at Deloitte. Welcome, Silvia.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome to Giulia Genuardi, Head of Sustainability Strategy, Planning and Reporting of Enel Group. And welcome to Emilio Rossi, Senior Advisor, Oxford Economics.
Hello, thank you and for the invitation, and look forward to discussing with you.
Welcome, Emilio. So let's start the panel with an important contribution of Mr. Pedro Guaso, representative of the Secretary General for Investments at the United Nations Joint Staff Pension Funds and CEO at United Nations Joint Staff Pension Funds. Please open the link.
Family Economy Week.
Corporate social responsibility, sustainable investing, and ESG are terms that have been besides us for the last 10-15 years. It all started with the discussion on sustainable investing and corporate social responsibility. We in the United Nations, we took the first steps in order to bring the world together to speak about these issues. We created the United Nations Global Compact, which is a group of companies from the private sector from all around the world and all the industries that commit themselves to do good and be aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. We also created the Principles for Responsible Investments. This is the philosophy, it is the same, but it attracts only investors in order to align their investment practices to Sustainable Development Goals and to the principles of ESG, environment, social and governance aspects. From then on, a lot of things have happened. The Global Compact and the Principles of Responsible Investment have increased their membership by thousands of entities interested in to pursue sustainable investment and compliance with ESG. I would say that in the last 3 years, we have seen a spike in the discussion of ESG all over the world, not only governments, but also private sector and us institutional investors. There's a lot of things that are happening, especially in the environmental side of things, with a commitment that has been pushed by the United Nations to get to net zero by 2050, which is one of the key motors of this ESG. But we never have to forget about the social and governance issues, because that is what drives us and will drive our humanity to better results in the way we produce goods and assets and we invest in those goods and assets. ESG and corporate social responsibility and sustainable investment, for us, it's as simple as doing good and doing no harm. That is why we believe in these principles, and we believe that most people have to follow them. What we have done in the United Nations Pension Fund, as being part of the United Nations family, we have always aligned our business practices and our investment practices to ESG and to commit to net zero. We have adopted ESG overlay in our investment practices. We take this seriously, and we consider ESG not only a risk management and compliance technique, but especially an angle in which we have to analyze every potential investment that we make together with return, and they have to be ESG compliant. As I said, we try always to do good and not to do harm while we do our investments. We're signatory members of the PRI. We have been receiving the best grades from the PRI for the last years, and we also have made huge commitments to achieve net zero by 2050 by reducing our carbon emissions by 40% in 2025, and we have already decreased our carbon emissions by 30% in this 2021. What I see the challenges ahead for all of us in the industry of investment, but also in the bigger perspective for all the countries and private sector, is how do we align our practices to common standards on ESG? There has been a lot of talk that we have a lot of data available and some data that is being developed, but we don't have standardized measures to define who's really ESG compliant, who's really attaining their net zero goals, and have a comparable term for those things. I think that the industry and what we're trying to do is to move forward towards standardized approaches that will help us, investors, companies, governments, policymakers, but also consumers, to determine who is really ESG compliant and who is doing sustainable investment. Because what we are noticing is that people are more conscious and more aware, and consumers want us to be ESG compliant.
So thanks, Mr. Guaso. We decided to start with this contribution on sustainability and the topic of today, energy transition. And let's start with Marco Alberti. Marco, energy transition is a question of finance, of course, but not only. How much the innovation and public-private relationship make a difference?
Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you very much for having me today. Let me just go straight to the point and answering with three points, very linked among them. One is that even before that, the question of finance or environmental sensitivity, the current transition is a question of economy. A question that impacts directly on the competitiveness of companies, first of all, but also of cities, of countries, and so on. So the sustainability, the environmental sustainability, which moves, the energy transition, is a precondition for competitiveness, is a factor of competitiveness. And that means that it is absolutely unavoidable. It's something that we have to face. And there is something interesting that we have rapidly passed from corporate social responsibility to sustainability and creating shared value. So it's a very long jump. Corporate social responsibility, it was not at the very center of the business models. It was a complex, it was project-led, it was a complex of project or intervention to mitigate some impact. But when we talk about sustainability today, we are talking about something which determines the entire strategy of the company, of the city, of the country. And finance, finance is very keen on this, and finance knows very well that a sick planet is a financial risk. So the strength that finance has put on the energy transition is exactly linked to the perception that they need to reduce the risk. And a more healthy planet is always a less intensive risk. And that's the reason why sustainable finance is pushing very hard on the transition. Only in the first 3 months of 2021, this year, the Sustainable Exchange Traded Fund worldwide has been $2 trillion, $2 trillion in 3 months, with a very significant increase of 18% compared to 2020. Second point, the transition is a question of technological innovation. Perhaps it's the first time in history that we have two big global unstoppable transition altogether. And we have to be absolutely clear on one point, that with no innovation, there's no sustainability. With no innovation, there is no energy transition. Because the energy transition is not only replacing coal with wind, pails, or panels. It changes the concept of energy, And in order to have an acceleration, and in order us to reach out to the goals that we have assigned in Paris, we absolutely need to increase the technology injected into the system. And if we take, the case of renewables, the renewables are a case in point, over the last 9 years, not half a century, 9 years, the cost, of solar and PV solar energy has reduced 85%. And the cost of wind onshore has reduced 56%. And that's thanks to technology. Net zero society, on one side, is a very ambitious goal, but it's not a net zero project. So finance and economy need to be absolutely involved. And one of the fundamental steps from the millennial goals of 2000 to the 2030 development agenda is exactly the involvement of the private sector. And the third point that I want to raise is the transition by nature. This transition by nature is a challenge, public and private challenge. It's a public and private challenge, Without the vision of the public, without the vision of the United Nations that framework, the agenda, it would not be possible today to make money on sustainability. It would not be possible, to push the energy transition so hard and so fast. That's a clear point. For the first time in history, public and private are not only public and private, but are public with private, and private companies with public administration, because it is the only possible way to reach out to the goals that we have fixed. And let me conclude with one point. The only possible way to innovate the system is to open to one another. Public and private sector have the great opportunity to push and to accelerate transition only if they are open to one another, only if they create innovation, open innovation to one another, only if they accept that innovation technology is something necessary to be sustainable, and that sustainability is possible only if we inject a lot of innovation. Thank you.
You are absolutely right, Marco, and thanks for your contribution. And I think also an event like this, a panel like this, could be and could contribute to the platea to get people more aware, to get stakeholders more aware about this necessity to have to combine the private culture with the public culture. And we started with the contribution of Mr. Guaso. He represents one of the most important pension fund in the world. And Silvia, this question is for you. Let's start from what the so-called institutional investors are and what can be their role in the energy transition and why is it so relevant?
Thank you to invite me today, and starting to the role of institutional investor, the centricity of this player in the energy transition as also remarked by the European Union. Indeed, the European Union has stated that the scale of the investment challenge required to reach the decarbonization goal to be in line with the Paris Agreement is behind the capacity of the public sector alone, as already said before. So the financial sector and in particular institutional investor will have a key role to play by reorienting investments through sustainable technologies, through sustainable business, contributing to the creation of a so-called low carbon economy. In particular, we are different forces that are fostering institutional investor role in the transition. First of all, the European Union is developing a new regulation, a new regulatory requirement for the institutional investor in order to promote transparency and to create a standardized framework on ESG financial product. And this will push the inclusion of ESG criteria in the investment strategies. Secondly, the investors are now even more aware of the importance to manage ESG and in particular ESG risk. And taking into account ESG factors in their investor strategies will allow to minimize investment risk and to increase the financial return over the long term. To conclude, through sustainable finance and through direct engagement, the institutional investors are pushing companies to accelerate significantly their transition to a low carbon economy. In fact, only providing capital to companies that will drive the innovation and the transition, we will be able to reach the goal of net zero economy.
Yeah, and these words are really near to what Mr. Pedro Guaso said before. And he talked also about transparency and inclusion. And this sounds really interesting for the next question, because I would like to ask to Giulia Genuardi from Enel Group, what is the culture of Enel Group on sustainability, and when and how is sustainability division born?
So thank you for the question, because Enel decided to start with sustainability in a serious way many years ago. We decided to change our business model and not to manage sustainability as something separate respective business model as a silos. So we worked so hard to do that, because at the beginning it was a work in terms of procedures and policies. But in 2014, we changed completely our approach to sustainability, and we started to integrate sustainability and probably it's better word, in the business model, in order to change the business model, in order to measure in a quantitative way all our impact in terms of environmental, social, and governance. And was exactly the first year when the sustainability comes directly to report to the CEO. jointly with innovation, because for us, the sustainability is exactly the purpose of our business model, but innovation is the tool to reach this kind of purpose and to reach this kind of goal, because only sustainability jointly with innovation allow us to manage the so-called new normal or next normal in order to have the correct flexibility to manage the unpredictable world. So now the name of the unit is exactly Innovability, that merge also in the word innovation and sustainability, and is the first report of the CEO, but also the first report in all the countries where we are present, because we want that sustainability innovation are really part of our investment decision, our day-by-day activities. So, for example, especially in the energy transition, manage sustainability means, for example, change our energy mix, taking into account the planet, so reducing the CO2 emission, but at the same time, investing in upskilling and reskilling of the people that work inside the company, because when we close the thermoelectric power plant, now we have to move the person and the people in other work. And innovation, for example, is exactly a fundamental element to do that. So we have, for example, many people that worked in the thermoelectric power plant that now are the first drone pilot for the maintenance of the renewable power plant.
The next question for Emilio Rossi from Oxford Economics. Emilio, globally, what kind of microeconomic impact can the energy transition have?
Well, first of all, let me thank you again for the invitation. It's a very interesting topic, and of course, speakers. Let me make a remark first, personal remark. I need to make, you'll see why later. First thing is that I must say I'm a big supporter of the necessity to reduce emission and to contain the increase in temperature. And I don't think there is a question on what scientists are also recently have come up with in the latest IPCC report. So this is the first point. To answer your question, I must say I must emphasize how the economic impact, to evaluate the global economic impact, is really much more complex than for many other type of analysis that are done on global level, at economic level. There are a myriad of factors, not just the traditional ones like policy and what have you, but let's say that the main thing, the main item factor that must be kept into account is actually the energy transition requires a drastic transformation of the entire production system, not just the energy, but the entire production, also the utilization of energy in our daily life. So all the estimates that I will talk about and all the estimates that we see around are based on different assumptions of scenarios, various scenarios. To make it simple, I must say that the basic answer to your question, what is the impact, is that the impact at global level for the economy is actually a negative impact. This should be kept into account to evaluate what is that we are ready to spend or to accept for the future, since we have to go for reduction of emissions and containment of temperature. We've done at Oxford Economics a number of scenarios, and the actual reduction in GDP at the global level, according to the various hypotheses that one can make on what is the objective reduction of temperature, whether you accept 1.5 increase in temperature by the end of the century, or 2 degrees, or what kind of new technologies can come in, affect productivity, or what policies will be adopted. So a number of scenarios that we've done with our models And let's say the scenarios basically indicate a loss in GDP by 2050 between 2% and even 8% in the most drastic assumption of 1.5 degrees if the objective is to have an increase, to limit the increase to 1.5% in temperature. So this is the basic item. If I have a minute, I'll say why is there such an important negative economic impact? And basically, you have three reasons. One is that ultimately, despite of the reduction in prices that about before, just it's a fact, the renewables, the cost of renewables is still higher than the fossil fuels. And someone will have to pay for that. It could be public finances, consumers, companies, or the needs of the state. The second point is that when you have this kind of reshuffling of the industrial system, of the entire system, you have policies that tend to be not as expansionary as they would be otherwise. And the third point is that there will be inevitably a mismatch between, on the labor market, a mismatch between competencies which are actually available and competencies which are necessary to handle the new production system. So these three factors will weigh.
Thanks for your contribution, Emilio. We are understanding always more that transition is an economic issue, as Marco said before. And Marco, the challenge of energy transition is, we can say, systemic. And Biden's America has taken a new road on these themes with respect to the previous administration. And as we know, the Chinese giant has placed great challenges compared to CO2 emissions. How important is international cooperation, and how Italy is doing in this field, Marco?
Thank you, Marco. I mean, any transition may be two ways: cooperative or disruptive. That's, the only possible way. And I said before that the energy transition we are facing is a challenge of public-private sector jointly. So it's cooperative by definition. If we want, to get some results, concrete results, and not only slogans, we absolutely need to conceive the transition as a cooperative process. Otherwise, it would not have any sense to have, some countries were a sort of clean club in the world, and other countries which keep polluting. And the reason is very clear, because the environmental damage has not boundaries. So it's impossible to conceive some countries as clean and some others dirty. If we want to improve the planet, if we want to improve the environmental condition, we need to cooperate. And the Paris Agreement actually is a form of cooperation. And the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations is a great multilateral cooperation product. And the Green Deal of the European Union is a cooperation, is formed as a scheme of cooperation. And regarding, in this specific concept, regarding the new American administration, the targets that the administration has fixed and the resources that have put, to reach out to new climate step of the American history are extremely ambitious. To cut 52% emissions compared to the level of 2005 is really is a very strong commitment. My personal feeling is that the Biden America has understood that he had to immediately recover the leadership in this key sector. Not only because it's for politics, but also for economics. Because Biden and his staff have very clear in mind that this transition is not only a question of politics or environmental politics, but it's a question of economy. And three considerations. One is that probably from the new vision of America, we can extract three messages. One is that they want to consider the environment and the protection of the environment not only as a form of, as an object of protection, direct protection, but as a sort of criteria to determine and to elaborate politics. It's a general criterion, the environment protection. Second, that the contrast to climate crisis is necessary, is a necessary precondition to relaunch the American economy, to transform it and to make it more competitive, which is something that America needs today, particularly after the pandemic crisis. And the third consideration is probably the American administration wants to make these measures and this advancement irreversible. I mean, this is a not returning point. We need to move on, and to move on very fast in order to save the planet and to reach out the objective that we have fixed. I have a final, just to conclude, my personal guess is that, I mean, all of us are already embarked on a race to green, but it is a race. So the climate could be considered a ground for collaboration, as we said, but also a ground for competition. And competition is good or maybe bad, according to how we manage it. I mean, having a clean planet without China is impossible. China, I mean, contributed for 28% of the total emission, whilst Europe is just, I mean, 7% of the global emission. So it's impossible to conceive a clean planet without China and India. And if we conceive the green race this way, we can't be disruptive. We need to be collaborative. And last but not least, Italy. I mean, Italy has a great opportunity. Italy has a great opportunity to relaunch its economy through sustainability. I mean, 70 billion of the recovery fund are destinated, I mean, to the transition, to the ecological transition. That's a great opportunity. Italy is a top performer in the circular economy, has very competitive and very advanced companies, big and small companies in the green industry. It has the largest utility in Europe, which is Enel. And this year has the double position of the chairman of the G20 and co-chair of the COP26. So a great opportunity to leave a sort of powerful legacy for the future of a better planet.
Yeah, you're right, because it is a magic moment for Italy from international point of view. And you use also the word cooperation. Cooperation means behaviors, and about behaviors, we have a contribution of Beatrice Conte. She is a behavior scientist of A Better Place, and she will talk us about climate change, emotions, and human behavior. Please open the link with Beatrice Conte.
Family Economy Week.
Climate change represents one of the biggest threats to our society. And even though we're aware that a successful transition to more sustainable lifestyles and also economic systems is a necessary step to mitigate the effects of climate change, we experience every day how taking it into account in our decisions is very difficult. Translating our intentions to fight climate change into more eco-responsible choices as citizens, as consumers, as business owners, investors, or even policymakers clashes against a series of barriers that are not only related to the opportunities that we have, but also to our psychology as human beings. So you might wonder, how does human psychology work in relation to climate change? And what are the behavioral tools that we can use to help translating intentions into sustainable actions? With the coronavirus experience, we have seen that in front of an emergency, in front of a threat, humans are very good in adapting to new behaviors. For example, when we felt that the risk of contagion was very close or very high, we developed a series of new habits, such as wearing a mask or stop hugging our friends or shaking hands. And we did that very quickly, in a very functional way. So why can't we do the same for climate change? The answer is in our brain. As humans, we are not programmed to respond to threats that we cannot see, touch, or experience directly. And climate change is exactly one of them. So research has shown that people perceive climate change as more distant in space and in time than it is. We think it's real, we know it's happening, but since we cannot relate it to our everyday experience, we also think it's going to affect someone else, somewhere else, at some point. And this is called the psychological distance from climate change. The psychological distance from climate change makes it less urgent for us to choose, for environmental reasons, more sustainable products instead of traditional ones. And for the same reason, to reduce the heating in our homes when outside is cold, for example. Another interesting implication of the psychological distance from climate change is that it makes us not feel too emotional about climate change. One of my favorite quotes from Professor Elke Weber from Princeton University is that climate change doesn't scare us enough. I think this is absolutely true. We don't get emotional enough when we think about nature and the risks of the climate crisis. Emotions are the most powerful drivers of human behavior. Our memories are linked to emotions. Our decisions are affected by emotions and cause emotions. The way we feel about something shows how much we care about it. So for this reason, I think it's important that we start feeling something towards climate change too. In this direction, most of the effort in the past tried to make people feel guilty for environmental damage or ashamed for their responsibility. Think about the famous WWF campaigns showing dying polar bears or images of melting glaciers. The risk of using this kind of communication, though, is to push people away and make them neglect the topic completely. Our cognitive system is programmed in a way that we can only worry about a limited number of problems at a time, focusing on the most important and urgent ones. It is called the finite pool of worry effect. Because of this principle, as we don't perceive climate change as urgent as our more tangible issues, we tend to forget about it. Also, defense mechanisms kick in. In front of repetitive negative information that makes us feel responsible for a problem that we feel we cannot solve, the easiest way is just to handle the stress by denying or ignoring the issue. So if negative emotions don't work, what about positive emotions? Research has shown that people feel good when they engage in sustainable actions. They literally warm up, experiencing a sense of fulfillment and pride for doing the right thing. It is called the warm glow effect. Take a moment to recall if you've ever experienced it. Maybe you felt very proud for installing solar panels on your rooftop, or you felt that you were doing the right thing by using reusable bags for your groceries. These are all very simple but very powerful experiences that we can bring into our life. In my own research, I find that positive emotions are boosted by a sense of personal control. When people feel in control of their own impact on the environment, they are more likely to experience stronger positive emotions towards sustainability. This means that we are more motivated when we're able to quantify our positive impact on the environment. Taking all of this together, it seems that in order to create real and long-lasting sustainable change, we need to empower people and fuel them with positive feelings. This doesn't mean that we should not openly discuss the negative effects or the risks of climate change. Rather, it means that so far we have focused too much on the negative effects and on the risks. So for these reasons, it's my hope that policymakers will start considering behavior change through positive emotions as an important leverage for climate action. At A Better Place, our mission is exactly to take this kind of behavioral insights and help institutions, peoples, and organizations to translate them into successful interventions for climate action. Meanwhile, I think we can all try in our everyday life to become more aware of how doing good makes us feel good, and learn how to use our most inner self, that is our emotions, as a fuel to bring real change into the world.
Very interesting points, Beatrice, speaking about positive way and reflecting about that the climate change doesn't scare us enough. This is a real strong sentence, and that means that we need to be and think about positive actions that get us absolutely more personally involved in this kind of change. Very interesting point. And now, Giulia, speaking of cooperation, also Marco told before in his answer, speaking of cooperation, the company is a complex system where, even in your case about Enel Group, cooperation and corporate culture makes the difference. From your privileged observatory, how do you create a corporate culture in people who can lead in a real way, to a favorable environment?
Yes, consider that now it's impossible to manage sustainability if we don't create a systematic approach to sustainability. And this thing means that we have to work with all people external of the company, but we have to involve all the people inside the company. And so inside the company, we have to create a strong culture in terms of sustainability, because they have to work on sustainability day by day. We are more or less 68,000 of people around the world in more than 40 countries. So you can understand really that we have a different level of maturity on sustainability. We have different level of knowledge on sustainability and different level of culture about that. So we decided to create also an innovability area where we spread the innovability culture. We have a specific ambassador that support us in this kind of thing in order to understand the real meaning of sustainability and innovation, but especially to have the courage to put in place sustainability, because sustainability is sometimes something new, something without reference. And so it's absolutely important that the people has the ability, the capacity to invent, to experiment with a no-blame culture, because we have a huge amount of ideas in the companies, and we have to create a strong culture to put in value this kind of opportunities, and they have the opportunity to share their stories. It's not necessary that there are successful stories. It's important that they share their stories and their ideas in order to improve really our sustainability approach, because we have to experiment and to invent every day to really reach and catch the opportunities of this kind of energy transition.
Thanks, Giulia, for your answer. And now I want to introduce you a contribution of Daniela Bernacchi. Daniela is the Secretary General of Global Compact Network in Italy. I'm just asking to Daniela, what is the impact of energy transition on local and global economies from your point of view? Please open the link.
Family Economy Week.
Thank you for inviting Global Compact Network Italy to this interview. Talking about the role of corporate finance towards the Agenda 2030, it's very important and increasing role. We must say that investment in ESG are increasing rapidly, and corporate finance is more and more engaged. The World Bank estimates that companies spend close to 17.5 trillion annually on general corporate investment. And the share of this investment that is dedicated to ESG investment is increasing. We also know that due to the pandemic, we are far from reaching the Agenda 2030, and the objective we all shared. Our UN agency estimate that we need to spend from 3 trillion to 5 trillion annually to meet the SDGs by 2030. So it's a huge amount of money, and not only governments, but as I said, business can give an important contribution. We, as Global Compact, launched in 2019 a CFO task force, and with this task force we are engaging listed companies, but not only, in incrementing the amount, the percentage of corporate investment to ESG financing. And our aim, our estimate is to invest close to 500 billion in the next 5 years. Among this company, for instance, we have Enel. They launched an SDGs linked bond, and it's very interesting because the interest rate is changing according to the fact that they reach or miss the targets of installing renewable energy in their business. So it's very important to also keep track of the results the company are doing. And we are asking companies, and we think all institutions should ask company to implement key indicators in order to monitor the effect and the real impact of their investment, and also to communicate and report in accountable and transparent way what they're doing with this investment. There is, unfortunately, the phenomenon of greenwashing, and this is why institutions as a UN Global Compact, but not only, are seriously taking into consideration the monitoring tracking of investment. Why should company invest on SDGs? And it's quite simple, because in the recent past, all the CFO were very much interested in economic sustainability, but this is only one of the pillars. Full sustainability is a competitive advantage for companies. This is why more and more corporate finance is taking into consideration ESG investment. And also another reason is a practical one. Institutions and banks are more likely to give access to credit for this kind of investment than for other kind of investment. So it's more likely to attract capital, and this is one of the issues. And another issue is that companies investing in ESG not only are concretely contributing to the Agenda 2030, but are also able to attract intellectual capital, I would say, high talented people that are more likely to work for this kind of companies that in companies where sustainability is not an issue. So there are different reasons to join this kind of investment, and we as an institution are sponsoring our own task force, CFO task force, but also collaborating in a multi-stakeholder logic to all forums and events where responsible finance is one of the topics, because we think that involving companies is a must if we all want to reach Agenda 2030.
And thanks, Daniela, for your contribution. It's really important that a structure like yours is involving in create and develop culture about CSR and also about energy transition. And now, Emilio Rossi, I want to talk with you about, I think, a very bad point. We touched upon it in the first answers. In the energy transition, it's estimated $300 billion of stranded assets in North America only, concerning the loss of capitalization of companies related to oil and fossil. What is the strategy, in your opinion, to be implemented for the mitigation of a bubble that seems more and more concrete?
That's a very good question, Marco. It's one of the key issues. I mean, if we want to go as we want to go globally to reduce emissions and to have a different energy system, of course, the giants, the current giant corporations in the oil and gas fields will inevitably have to slim down. And that, of course, implies big change. And it's not a big change only for the corporation as such, and of profitability of the corporation and the level of production and activities that the corporation is engaged in, but it has to do a lot with the employment issues. The labor market is going to be heavily affected by the slimming down of these companies that currently, of course, they employ hundreds of thousands of people just in the US. And your question is very difficult to answer, I must say. But I would say that one item that maybe should be considered, I think maybe the European Commission in this has not been very careful as far as Europe is concerned. I feel that the targets that have been established by the European Commission are a bit too aggressive, difficult to achieve, despite the fact that, of course, we have to do something. But I think the targets must be, in a way, must give time to the transition to take place ordinarily, without major disruptions. And again, especially for the disruption that the radical quick transformation the impact we can have on the labor market. And there is another area where I think collaboration that Marco was mentioning earlier, is essential. Collaboration between corporations, policymakers, and universities, or all the agencies of formation and education, those involved in lifelong learning, etc. Because as I said in my previous intervention here, a big issue will be the mismatch that will come from mismatch in competence that will come for the people who are currently working for these big, fossil fuel related corporations, and the actual kind of skills that will be required in the new environment where energy will be based on renewables. So there's going to be a need for big change in the skills. It must be people, employees must be accompanied to a process of learning and changing their abilities in order to answer the new needs. And this, of course, will have also to be accompanied to an effort to help the corporations that will have to slim down. And to slim down those corporations, they probably need to do some kind of reorientation of their activity. And there are examples here in Italy, for example, with Eni that has already started being present in the electricity field, or Enel that is producing photovoltaic a lot in the US, in fact, or Snam that is being very aggressive in pushing the government, or pushing anyway the use of hydrogen, because it will go through this current Snam gas pipelines. So there is a way to reorient those big giants to something, to new business. Maybe it will not be properly, actually, it will not be as big as they will not be as big as they are today, but still, a decent-sized company can anyway be profitable. But again, the big issue is, yes, orienting the business of these companies, but especially to work in the area of formation of the employees that will have necessarily to be somehow reoriented or even laid out, unfortunately. But there is that kind of, we need to have that kind of responsibility of cooperating together in this field.
And Emilio, we could call it upskill transition, because it's a very good point what you mentioned about this problem of regenerate and reskill so many people from old to new technologies. And now the question is for Silvia. Instead, we come to the role of final investors and their role with respect to the energy transition. Why can they represent the real flywheel, and what should be done at the level of public-private system to encourage the current investment choices in this direction? Thanks, Silvia.
So the final investor can have a remarkable impact, of course, on energy transition. Indeed, private investor demand can foster the development of institutional investor product and investment strategies that are focused on sustainability and in particular on energy transition fields. And this trend is already noticeable, as said also before by Marco, and we had a sharp increase in capital flow through sustainable investment product during 2021. For example, looking at a recent study from Assogestioni, sustainable funds now represent more than a quarter of the total of funds distributed in Italy. And this will increase, of course, in the future. We already speak before about the necessity of more awareness on these topics, and this is true also for final investor. Private investor demand can guide this transition, but final investor shall be able to clearly understand the differences of the different financial products in the market and which is the real impact of a product on sustainability factors. This fundamental prerequisite involves the need of a stronger education for final investors. And this task have to be covered also by the financial sector, of course. Moreover, marketing information, contractual information provided by the institutional investors should be even more clear and objective as possible in order not to deceive private investor choices. And to guarantee this important point, some steps have already been taken also by the regulator, by the European Commission, through the introduction, for example, of the taxonomy regulation, of the SFDR regulation, that are the first step in order to define a European sustainable finance framework, and so in order to allow the private investor to clearly identify products linked to the low carbon transition.
You are absolutely right, Silvia, and we are aware that European Parliament and European laws are pushing in a very good way in a direction to create a taxonomy and a common framework about sustainability finance. And this is really important to orient banks and financial institutions for the fund of final investors. And about final investors, I want to introduce you a contribution of Sara Mella, head of personal banking Nordea from Finland. And the question for Sara is how it's possible for an individual investor to live low and make a difference in investing in sustainability. Please open the link.
Family Economy Week
The world is facing a number of sustainability-related challenges, including the climate crisis, increasing resource scarcity, and human rights issues. While the world is changing, so must we. As a response, there is increased demand for sustainable business models from consumers, employees, and regulators. Sustainability-related challenges have and will have an impact on company valuations, and by that, it will have an impact on the returns on the funds we provide to our clients. We believe that the companies that provide solutions to these challenges and that have high ESG standards are better prepared for the future and are expected to deliver as good potential return when part of well-diversified portfolio. There are many things we can do in our everyday life to reduce our environmental footprint. Recycle, eat less meat, take the bus instead of the car, etc. Also, your savings has a footprint, which is often a lot larger than that from your everyday life. By investing in equity funds, you indirectly own shares of companies and thereby also own a part of their resource usage. The same logic goes for bonds. When you lend money to a company, you have a stake in the company and its resource usage. Therefore, what you choose to invest in matters. Choosing an offering with enhanced focus on sustainability often means a lower personal footprint, for example, lower CO2 emissions. Being a large investor means that Nordea has the possibility to steer companies in a more sustainable direction. As an active owner in the companies we invest in via our funds, we use our investor power to vote at annual general meetings, have company dialogues with CEOs, and visit companies on the ground to understand their sustainability challenges. We also participate in collaborative initiatives where several investors join forces to push companies into acting more sustainably. Active ownership is not only about doing good by improving companies' sustainability practices, it is also an investment opportunity. Research shows that there is a link between improved company sustainability ratings and the return of investments. Therefore, not all companies we invest in will be perfectly sustainable from the start, but we invest in them as we see the potential of improvement and an opportunity for us to support the transition. Our investments can also contribute to making a real change here and now. As mentioned, it is natural for large investors to be able to make a direct impact through engaging with the companies to improve their work with sustainability. However, every individual has the chance to make an impact, and it does not require significant investments or large monthly savings to do so. Just with a small sum, 20 euros or 50 euros per month, or whatever you choose. You join the huge amount of monthly savers, where small streams jointly become a strong and powerful flow. Private investors can make a large impact through, e.g., collaborating together with other investors to become part of a larger group or participating in annual general meetings at the companies they invest in to push companies to adopt and improve their sustainability standards. The journey from a private investment to more sustainable companies is, for example, faster growth with cheaper capital costs. When a private investor invests in sustainable funds, the funds invest the money into a sustainable company or companies who have an ambition to move in a more sustainable direction. The more demand there is towards e.g. stocks of sustainable companies, the cheaper the capital is for these companies. And this then supports their growth. Active ownership is the other way to make an impact. And when a private investor invests in sustainable funds, The funds, as active owners, require companies to move in a more sustainable direction and vote for sustainable decisions in their operations. The decisions then have an impact, a direct impact on the transformation journey towards a more sustainable company. In summary, we strongly believe that you can do good while doing well with your savings, investing in a way that benefits the world around you and also your wallet. Every amount makes a difference. Thank you.
So investing to have benefit for us and for the planet, for the energy transition. And regarding Italy and regarding big transitions, I would like to ask to Emilio about PNRR, the advantages of this huge plan for the future for Italy are really incalculable. It's really amazing. It's an historical plan. What are the great obstacles you see in the realization of the plan?
Well, as you say, the first thing to be said about the plan is that it's a very big opportunity. There are, let's say, all the aspects that Italy should deal with are actually historically. I mean, Italy should have faced historically, Italy should have worked on historically. By historically, I mean, last 20, 30 years, even some problems, structural issues for at least 20, 30 years. And each of those items is actually taken care of in the plan. A big part of the plan is actually the need for reforms that will be the prerequisite for the Italian government, for Italy to receive the funds that have been asked the European Commission. So it's all connected. And this is to be always very well kept in mind. I mean, it's not only a question of the amount of money that we fall into Italy, but it's the fact that all the various milestones will have to be accompanied and will be conditional to the achievement of serious important reforms in the various fields where it really needs it. So this is the first point that needs to be said. At the same time, this is also one of the biggest challenges, because Italy has not managed to handle those structural issues because there has always been a political difficulty to do that. I mean, the issues has always been political in how to achieve those reforms. Will this be possible now in a few years? Well, of course, we hope so, but that is the first challenge that I can see. In terms of the actual concrete layout of the plan, the actual concrete performance of the plan, there is one issue which has to do with the concentration of the various line of investments of the plan in a couple of sectors, and one especially is construction. With the conservatory of the tertiary sectors that I have the honor to manage for managing Italia here in Italy, we've made an assessment that about 80 billion will be actually initially moved from the plan to the construction sector. That is a huge amount of money. It's about 40 or just over 40% of the total amount. This is a consequence also of how the plan has been structured at European level. Of course, the green transition and the digitalization and also the infrastructure amount of money was already defined within the Next Generation EU. So the PNRR, the Italian plan, could not could not go out of those guidelines. So it is, in a way, normal that the construction sector would end up receiving this huge amount of money. But Italy is also the country that is receiving the largest sum, because Italy is basically the only country, or at least of the large countries, is the only country that is asking not only for grants but also for loans. So the total amount is really, becomes really huge. The total amount that goes into the construction sector is huge. Why would that be a problem? And I don't think it's a question of the construction sector per se, but the fact is that Italy is typically low, has typically very low administrative procedures. A few years ago, the OECD estimated that in Italy, to deliver a project of over 2 billion, the average time would be about 15 years. This tells you, and 2/3 of that would be due to the initial stages before even the project starts. So it was all administrative procedures. So in the moment in which you devote a large amount of money to the construction sector, that amount of money is dependent on the speed with which actually the administration, public administration, will be able to handle that kind of requests for projects. It's not a minor issue. And of course, the government is very well aware of this. It is one of the reforms that I was mentioning earlier, that maybe the first one that should be actually implemented. So in principle, something should improve. But anyway, this is again the challenge, because those administrative procedures also involve local governments, involve a number of actors and players. It's not easy really to make a reform in a few months that manage to simplify those processes to allow that amount of money to be handled by the construction sector. So these are the two issues, I think, that we look at. The ability to make reforms and to handle and avoid the bottlenecks, to handle the projects in a way to avoid bottlenecks from one sector.
Is absolutely right. And also talking with other countries and with other colleagues in other countries, they are facing also similar problems approaching the PNRR, or also in other countries. So we want to talk now about finance and sustainability with Giulia. Giulia, what are the concrete examples that your group can represent about finance and sustainability together?
So consider that NL, as we said, has defined a specific business model that is a sustainable business model. So for us, finance is exactly something that supported this kind of business model. So finance becomes sustainable finance because support the sustainable business model. We started in 2019, exactly as the other companies, with the green bond, with the launch of the green bond, and we launched the 3 green bond related to the most important project that we have in the company, related to distribution, infrastructure, and renewable. But then we thought that it's not enough, because this kind of green bond were bond related to specific sustainable project, but not related to the sustainable strategy of the company. And so we started working on that in order to define a new innovative financial instrument really related and linked to the strategy of the company. So in this way, it's absolutely impossible that you have some sustainable project and you are a non-sustainable company. So we launched for the first time the so-called sustainability linked bond. At the beginning, the correct naming was SDG linked bond. And this kind of bond are a little bit different respect the green bond, because are strongly focused on target and not only on KPIs ex post. And this kind of target are totally aligned with the strategy of the company, because are linked to the SDG 7 and SDG 13, exactly related to the growing in renewable capacity and reduction of CO2 emission. So in this way, we have also our finance strongly linked to our strategy. So in this way, we have a win-win approach. So we work focused on this kind of two main important targets for the energy transition. And we ask to our investors to do the same thing, supporting us through the sustainability linked bond. Consider that I think that it wasn't an easy work, because it was for the first time that we launched a new financial instrument. So we had to disseminate this kind of new concept. We started using a specific methodology in order to guarantee that behind of this kind of instrument, we have a strong and robust audit verification on all KPIs. But now we launched the sustainability linked bond more or less for 14.6 billion. And the other company is following us. And now the market is more or less 80 billion of US dollar in this kind of market. So we are really appreciating this kind of new direction that is really focused on the strategy. So for us, it's important to create also something new that is really related to in a concrete way to the sustainable strategy and sustainable business model.
We can call it a culture transition, because to do this kind of thing in a very large group like yours, I think has been a great challenge. And talking about company, Silvia, this last question for you. As a consultancy company, you have a global look on how investors are interpreting their role with respect to the transition to a low carbon economy. And what are the best practices you have identified on the market, and what are the aspects in which the market should improve?
Yeah, asset managers or insurance companies and other institutional investors are taking worldwide an increasingly active role to promote the transition to a low carbon economy. And reflecting investor demand, institutional investors are developing new products and services with a specific aim to sustain the transition to low carbon technologies through effective and structured ESG investment strategies. For instance, some of these strategies involve thematic investment. This kind of investment required funds to invest only in company, for example, operating sector that contribute to the transition in line with the taxonomy, or in line with a specific SDGs. Or other investment strategies involve investing company that although not operating in a specific low carbon sector, are adopting strategy to reducing their emission, for example, in line with the science-based target. Furthermore, asset manager and investor are increasingly developing new investment approach that proactively contribute to the ESG objective promoted by the investment product. For example, the so-called Article 9 defined by the SDGs SFDR new regulation. For example, through an active engagement with the management or with the board of the portfolio company on sustainability matters, or by monitoring actively and managing actively the adverse impact on sustainability factor generated by their investment. But the market of sustainable finance and sustainable investment products is relatively new. So there are also room of improvements. For example, as today, a big emphasis is given on investing on organizations operating in sectors that are already aligned with the energy transition, are aligned with the new taxonomy, but only few products are now focused on guiding the transition across all sectors. So also across the carbon intensive sector. And as already said, financing the transition of carbon intensive sector will be fundamental to reach the goal of a low carbon economy.
Thanks, Silvia, for your contribution. And we are almost at the end of this very interesting panel. And Marco, now is for you. Your role takes you to a wonderful world. We are talking about Kazakhstan, and I would like to end right with you this session. How is this transition breathed from so far, and what can we learn from a country like Kazakhstan?
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank Enel. I spent 9 years working for the company, but now I realize how important it has been for me to work in that company, for the level of advancement and the top-notch ideas that I have observed during those 9 years. And I'm really grateful, because now what I learned in Enel is very useful for my current position. I'm working in a country that has 70%, I repeat, 70% of the electricity generated by coal. So the challenge is very tough. It's very tough for the country itself, but it's very tough, for the ones who want to promote a different, energy concept and energy transformation. But let me also say that, all the countries worldwide are stepping into a new phase. We are moving from aspiration to execution. So the point is not the strategy, the point is not the targets. The point today is how able we are to turn the policy, to turn the politics, and to turn the targets into projects. The point is projects, and Kazakhstan is moving quite quickly. They wanted to multiply by 5 the renewable generation by 2030. So their current percentage is 3%. They want to reach out to 15% by 2030. They have already fixed a carbon neutrality by 2060, and they want to increase the level of technology injected into the system. They are ambitious, and that's the very point that we have to learn. How to be ambitious in order to get some results in the fight against climate change. The first step is being ambitious and putting all the resources that we have in motion. I think that this is the point that we can emphasize, and the lesson that we can learn in Kazakhstan, not very ideologically, but pragmatically focused on the transition. They know in Kazakhstan, everybody knows that yesterday I joined a very interesting event on the energy transition opened by the president of Kazakhstan. And what you breathed was that, they perfectly know that this transition is unstoppable. And they perfectly know that they have a very relevant percentage of the generation, which is hydrocarbons. But they are extremely pragmatic, and they are trying to make the transition manageable, which means not disruptive, but accelerated in a way that can be conceived as an economic opportunity. What one of the ministers yesterday said is that if we keep on considering the energy transition as an ideological process, or only an environmental issue, we will not reach out the target that we have fixed. Thank you. That's what I feel.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks for your words. And we are understanding that we have to work from every single corner of this wonderful world. So this is the lesson. And thank you to Marco Alberti, Italian ambassador in Kazakhstan, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Thanks to Silvia Dallai, Partner Sustainability Department at Deloitte. Thanks to Giulia Genuardi, Head of Sustainability, Strategy Planning and Reporting of Enel Group. Thanks Emilio Rossi, Senior Advisor, Oxford Economics. It has been an intense and rich panel of contents that I'm sure will contribute to increasing knowledge and awareness on energy transition. Thanks to all of you. And now coming back to 2099, the idea was born to sensitize as many people as possible to the responsibility of our actions in taking care of ourselves and the planet through the language that unites us all, music. And we did it with the youngest Italian musical talent, Virginia De Luti, an extraordinary author, composer, and singer. And 2099 is a generational embrace and a profound message for all of us, a kind of hymn to reflection, to the responsibility and what we must do today without ifs and buts for a more equitable, as we said, also in the round table, sustainable and inclusive world. So spread your arms, turn up the volume, and we are in 2099.
Another day in 2099. For another creep from ordinary lives. We have forgotten why we leave. What if mankind got it all wrong? Fairy tales speak of peace and sunlight, atmospheres color gold. Free love, was it found, was it treasured? Did they fight for what's gone? Did they fight to save life and mine? We started a war against our own home years ago, and we don't know. Alone myself with love and give no forms to what we lost. Fairy tales speak of trust, connivance, flowers that give us sense. Free air, was it found, was it treasured? Did they fight for what's gone? Did they fight to save life and mine? If only they pictured the ways we live in, would have surrendered away, and pride will stand up to keep breathing. Get together and try to change the world and risk it all. Buried to follow us, forget all late and try to let it go. What have we done?
Hi, I'm Virginia. I'm 19 and I'm here today because I was given the precious opportunity to work with Family Economy Week event, which deals with very important common themes that are really close to my heart. The passion of music was born several years ago, and although I wrote so many songs so far, 2099 is the song that I feel most inside. What have we done? It's pretty tragic, but I wrote the text in a moment of despair. I wrote a common situation in the new generations who find themselves having to fight for a world that is in serious danger and now given up for dead. But I am positive. I'm sure that together we will change things, and we have great ideas, new ideas, and a lot of willpower from what I see from this event. So I'm sure that it will change. It will change for the better, and because after all, we've got too much to lose.
And try to let it go. Thanks, Virginia, an extraordinary piece. And thanks to all that followed us today. Continue to discover the other conferences on the website www.familyeconomyweek.eu, and good continuation to all.
Wake up, cities, start and take control over your future. It's been days, weeks and years. It's time to make it real. Stand up with me. We have so many goals to believe in. We'll try everything to achieve it.